We're only actually conscious about 3 to 5% of the time. The rest of the time we're relying on our habits to drive the bulk of our behavior and our results.
Welcome to the Measure Success podcast, where we feature top leaders on how they measure success in their business and life. Now, let's learn from their experiences.
Carl J. Cox here, host of the Measure Success podcast, where I talk with top leaders about effective strategies that inspire success. This episode is brought to you by 40 Strategy. 40 Strategy is built to make strategy work for small to medium-sized businesses and organizations. By helping them, we help them not only design world-class strategic plans, but more importantly, keep them accountable to actually get it done. To learn more, go to 40strategy.com. We're also excited to talk about our book, Lost at CEO, which has become an Amazon bestseller when we launched. Encourage you to go out. You can find it on Amazon.com, Audible.com, BarnesandNoble.com. Those are all places you go and reach out and connect with it. And for a limited time offer, we are going to provide this book for free. A signed copy, if you want to send me an email, out to carljcox@40strategy.com. With that, really excited to have our guest, Phil Johnson. We already, just in the prep call, I was just fired up. It's like, oh man, I should have recorded. So hang on to your seats. This is going to be a fantastic discussion. He's the founder and CEO of the Master of Business Leadership program. MBL has been awakening success in entrepreneurs and executives for the past 23 years with billions in career revenue. Phil, welcome to the Measure Success podcast.
Oh, thanks, Carl. I'm looking forward to it. It's great to see you again.
Absolutely. So, as I said, I was fired up for a couple of reasons. First of all, you're like, hey, I just woke up at 12:30 a.m. this morning, no big deal, and so that was kind of interesting. But more importantly, you just got into this thing. We have a crisis on hand right now. Go into that in more detail, Phil. What are you talking about? Why is there a crisis? Help our listeners understand what's top of mind for you right now.
Sure. We're facing a tsunami accelerating global change that's an existential threat, something we've never had to deal with before. Some scientists estimate in this century we could experience the equivalent of 20,000 years worth of change, or 200 centuries worth of change, and we have a 500 million year old brain that doesn't like change. To put it in perspective, a 10-year-old today, by the time they're 60, will be experiencing the equivalent of a year's worth of change in a day and a half. Quite frankly, we lack the emotional intelligence to deal with the fear and anxiety that change and innovation always triggers in us. Our educational system has failed us, and our employment system has failed us because it's focused primarily on our ability to do intellectual labor and has done nothing to develop our emotional intelligence. And that is the critical capability and the next stage in our human evolution that we need in this century. There was a 40-year study done at UC Berkeley comparing IQ with EQ that concluded that emotional intelligence was 400% more valuable in determining career, personal, and corporate success than intellectual intelligence. I actually think it's much higher, but the point is that we're at a tipping point as a species where the development of our emotional intelligence has become as fundamental to our survival as air and water.
Phil, that is a no small comment that you made there when you're basically saying, look, the existence of our race is at risk if we don't learn how to change, if we don't learn how to adapt to things that are going on. And I agree from one perspective. I mean, I know from a business perspective, what we've been, if you may, preaching for especially over the last year, right? If you are not adopting to the new technologies and Generation AI in terms of a tool perspective, you're at risk. But what you're saying is even bigger. The people themselves, right, are at risk of not being able to handle the change.
Yeah, AI is simply a tool and is a reflection of our current level of consciousness. In order for AI to be better, we have to evolve our level of consciousness as a species. We're only actually conscious about 3 to 5% of the time. The rest of the time we're relying on our habits to drive the bulk of our behavior and our results. And that's good because our unconscious mind is stronger, faster, and takes less of our metabolic energy than our conscious mind. If we had to rely on our conscious mind to survive, we'd be dead instantly. Our conscious mind plays an important role, but it's our unconscious mind that's running the show. It's our unconscious mind that drives the bulk of our behavior and our results. So if we want better results than we're currently getting, we cannot get better results with our current habits. If we want to get better results, we have to develop better habits, and that requires us to do the emotional labor of leaving our comfort zone in order to create those new habits. And unless you have an urgent desire for better results than you're currently getting, you're simply not going to be willing to do the emotional labor that developing new habits requires. And most people aren't. The current level of employee engagement worldwide, according to Gallup, is around 13%. Toxic work environments are costing the U.S. economy over $1 trillion a year, and that is going to increase with the rate of global change. So we're at a tipping point where we must evolve, and the next stage in our human evolution, the critical part of our development that's missing, that anybody can develop, is their emotional intelligence. See, what happens is whenever we take an action that moves us, whenever we are faced with change, anything that causes us to move outside of our comfort zone, it triggers part of our lizard brain called the amygdala that's been trying to keep us safe and alive by making sure we never leave the security of our cave. If we do, it automatically triggers a release of a hormone into our bloodstream called cortisol, and that causes the executive center of our brain, our prefrontal cortex, to shut off, and we go into what psychologists refer to as an amygdala hijack. Some people lash out, some people run away, some people freeze like a deer in the headlights. When that happens in conflict situations, people die. When it happens in business or personal situations, relationships die. We burn trust. So as an analogy, if you think of your amygdala as a very frightened 4-year-old child, the development of our emotional intelligence acts like a big brother or a big sister to quiet the amygdala response down and better enable us to feel the fear and anxiety that change and innovation always triggers in us, and be able to recognize it and move through it towards what it is we're trying to achieve, as opposed to allowing that fear and anxiety to control us. So the development of emotional intelligence, more and more companies are developing and hiring based on emotional intelligence. And I'll give you an example of a company that's currently valued at a little over $3 trillion, and they're doing about $500 to $600 billion a year in revenue. And their primary hiring focus is emotional intelligence. That company's Apple. That's why when you walk into an Apple store, the way you feel in that environment is very different, because they're not trying to sell you anything. They're trying to understand your pain and, if possible, offer a solution to your pain. They want you to have a great experience, and maybe you'll tell your friends and they'll tell their friends. But if you think about it, the way you feel in that environment is very different than the energy coming out of the stores surrounding that environment. So that's an example of a more emotionally intelligent environment and the kind of results that it can produce.
Let me ask a question from the perspective of when EQ fails, what type of experiences are people in business having? You know, from if you're a leader or you're what are the symptoms of EQ that we're seeing in the world right now? And maybe we'll just leave it to the U.S. and Canada here up in Toronto. What are you seeing that is increasing at an alarming rate that's surprised even you?
Jesus. The toxicity is they don't want to go back into those toxic work environments. They would rather quit than go back into those toxic work environments. See, the pandemic gave us an opportunity to lift our heads up a little bit and reconnect with a less toxic work environment than they were in. And now that they've kind of got that consciousness, they remember what that's like, they don't want to go back into those toxic environments. So employee disengagement is massive. Lack of trust, lack of disengagement, having a negative impact on revenue and customer engagement. It's having a negative impact on everything. Turnover, you name it.
You know, it's interesting, Phil. It was interesting when you were talking about habits just a few minutes ago. And I was just, from the data that's recorded just a couple of days ago, I was in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And in that particular moment, it was really interesting. It was a 2-day event. And the first day, no assigned seats, right? Everyone comes in, they come from different organizations that have been recently acquired. They sit down and get comfortable the very next day, no assigned seats, and they all go to the exact same seat. It's fascinating. Here they were in a whole new environment, and the very next day they do something to get comfortable again, right? And that's, when we talk about strategic change, this is why it's so hard to change, right? As soon as we want to get comfortable, immediately right again, and we can't move forward because we keep on going back to comfort.
There's two primary biological sources of our resistance to change, and one sociological source of resistance. The first one I just mentioned, our amygdala. The second one is our existing habits. Once we develop a habit, it's there forever. It's a neural network pathway in our brain that we create through our actions. And although we can develop new habits at any age, it's called brain plasticity or neurogenesis, those new habits are always going to be weaker than the old habits, because when we're younger, there's an insulation layer that goes around the neural network pathway called myelin, and it's thicker when we're younger than when we're older. So although the new habits can get you better results than the old habits, they're always going to be weaker than the old habits. And there's going to be an ongoing internal battle between the old habits and new habits for dominance. The third source of resistance to change we have is sociological, meaning the people around us don't want us to change. Because if we change and start to get better results, maybe they're going to have to change. That scares the hell out of them. And the best way to ensure they don't have to change is to make sure we fail, so they can say, look, I told you so, now shut up and get your head down and come back into the herd with the rest of us. So unless you have an emotional connection to a desired result that's greater than the fear that's going to get triggered in you when you step outside of your comfort zone in pursuit of that desired result, you may want better results than you're currently getting, but you will not be willing to do the emotional labor that getting better results requires. And quite frankly, most people aren't. So what they try and do instead, if they're unwilling to change themselves, the only other alternative they have is try and change everybody else, often using some type of position-based power to control and manipulate others, steal their energy. And that's why the level of disengagement and all the rest of it is so high, because we've been playing that game for a very, very, very long time, and we just cannot continue to exist that way.
So, Phil, when you have this opportunity, when you're teaching, and you mentioned you have this course coming up, 1,000 people are planning to attend this online, you've obviously captured people's attention, right? That emotional IQ is a big deal. What are the key lessons or key principles that you help teach people that you can improve your emotional IQ and be more effective?
I can explain it to you very simply. It's a very simple process that is extremely hard to do. And it's really the difference between knowing something intellectually and knowing something experientially. See, the development of leadership and emotional intelligence is an experiential process. It's not an intellectual process. That means that you can't do it, you can't develop it by reading a book or having a conversation or watching a video, because those are intellectual processes. Where the rubber really meets the road is when you try to apply intellect into behavior, because that's where you run up against all that resistance.
Once again, the key is, how do you change? How do you increase that emotional IQ? Because it is something that's changeable, right? We can improve it and make a difference.
You learn to stop giving away your energy, and you develop better habits to do that. See, the root cause of everything we're talking about here and the root cause solution involves energy physics. And I read you something I wrote this morning on that. We don't know what we don't know, but when we're born, we're not born with a conscious mind. And I'm going to give you an example of what I'm about to say. When we're born, we're not born with a conscious mind. We are born with an unconscious mind, but we don't start to become conscious until we're about a year or so old. But we immediately start wiring up our brain, creating those neural network pathways that we need to survive, get food, all of that. And a lot of those pathways, a lot of those early habits unconsciously cause us to give away our energy. And we do it in lots of different ways. How we communicate, listen, take responsibility, make decisions, all sorts of ways. But when we're Giving away our energy creates an energy deficit in us. So at the same time we're unconsciously giving away our energy, we need to be replacing the energy we're giving away by stealing it from others. And that dynamic is going on inside of everybody, everywhere, all over the world, all the time. And that is the root cause of all drama, chaos, and conflict. So what I do in the Master of Business Leadership program is I show them how they're giving away their energy, and I give them better habits of practice to stop doing that. And when they stop giving away their energy, all that other stuff I mentioned earlier occurs as a result. Those are the outcomes. So let me give you an example of one example. There's one habit we talk about called authentic listening. And the key to authentic listening is not to take anything personally. How somebody feels about you, whether they like you, whether they hate you, has nothing to do with you. It has to do with what's going on inside of them. But if how you feel about yourself is based on how anybody feels about you, who's running your life, you or them? Well, it's them, right? If you like me, I like me. If you don't like me, I don't like me. Now, as crazy as that might sound, what I've just described is all of social media. We bend over backwards trying to get people to like us, to give away our energy so we can feel better about ourselves. But it doesn't end there. Because we're giving away our energy, conscious or unconscious, well, it's unconscious, we're simultaneously trying to steal energy from everybody around us to replace the energy we're unconsciously giving away. And that is the root cause of all drama, chaos, and conflict everywhere.
That is really interesting, really powerful, and it's interesting you brought in that example of social media, right? Once again, this is not my field of expertise what we're talking about here, but what's interesting is I think it's about 2.5 hours a day adults, U.S. adults are spending on social media, right? This has become one of our main sources of entertainment, if you may, and news and information. And the problem is most of the time it's extraordinarily negative.
We get bombarded with fear messaging constantly from everywhere. And quite frankly, it enslaves us to our ego-based fears, which keep us trapped in our comfort zones. It's a form of control. It's a form of slavery. We're enslaved by our fear. And the development of emotional intelligence reverses that. It allows us to distance ourselves from our ego-based fears, which creates agency, creates inspirational leadership, emotional intelligence, all that other stuff. We're bombarded with messaging designed to scare the hell out of us all the time. We need to be bigger, taller, stronger, richer, whatever, smarter. We need a new car. We need new clothes. We need eat better food. It's never ending, but it keeps us, it triggers the fear that stops us from moving out of our comfort zone. It causes us to unconsciously give away our energy and steal the energy of others. And if we want proof of that, all we need to do is stick our head out our window. Whatever we've been doing ain't working. With the development of emotional intelligence, that enslavery to our ego-based fear goes away. And it would completely change the face of business, government, education, everything. And the powers to be don't want that to happen.
Right. Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I literally, as you're talking through, of just how many millions, right, tens of millions, hundreds of millions accounts that are getting deleted by social media, like Facebook as an example. And what's crazy about that is those fake accounts are intended to do exactly that, which is create fear. I don't know, once again, who is the one, if you may, who's creating these fake accounts and trying to inspire, but they've shown information that happens in elections, right? That they're trying to change your opinion, try to change your mind. Here, and coming up in 2024 here, we have our next presidential election, right? And there's a lot of fear that goes into this.
Yeah, you're fighting for democracy.
Right. And what's interesting is when the fear also comes in there is we don't make the right, well, I shouldn't say we don't make the right decisions. They know that sells the most, right? They've learned long ago that.
Yeah, what happens is when fear kicks in, when we're in the midst of one of these amygdala hijacks, we're not thinking. We're reacting emotionally. It's a whole different part of the brain. Thinking occurs in the neocortex. Emotions occur in the limbic part of our brain, which sits right above the old lizard brain. And it's important to know all behavior is triggered, by the way, purchasing decisions as well, is triggered first in the limbic part of our brain by emotion. That part of our brain is faster than the thinking part of our brain, the conscious part of our brain. So that by the time we recognize what we're doing intellectually, we've already done it emotionally. So if we want to change our behavior, we have to change our emotions. So that's where the development of emotional intelligence comes in.
Super fascinating. I love this concept, right? Of what we can and we can't control, and then how do we be more open-minded. So I'm curious, what type of habits can we do every day? Because this is an everyday battle, right? Like this is not just we're going to take a class and think we're going to learn it and go over it. This is about retraining our mind.
It's develop new habits, which drives our actions, which drives the stories we tell ourselves. So everybody on the planet has a story they're telling themselves to justify whatever they're doing or not doing. One of the first things I say to people before I start working with them is, I don't care what you think. I only care what you do, because what you do will change what you think. What you think today is simply a reflection of what you're currently doing. And if you want better results than you're currently getting, you have to change what you're doing. You have to develop different habits. And that's automatically going to change the story you're telling yourself. So whatever story you're telling yourself is a reflection of your current results. And if you want better results, that story you tell yourself is going to change. So it doesn't matter what you're telling yourself today.
Phil, I looked up the data as we're talking here. Facebook, this is cybernews.com, November 15th, 2023. Facebook has deleted a staggering 27.67 billion Facebook accounts since October 2017. 3.5 times more than the total population of the planet. Why is that happening? Well, I mean, who is driving? I mean, I know what you're saying. You were kind of going towards this, but it's so fascinating, right?
Because the people in control that are using position-based power to control, manipulate, to steal our energy, because they lack emotional intelligence, because they're not really leaders, don't want to give up their power. We're the leaders we've been waiting for. If we want things to change, if we want better results, it's got to come from us. You can't have organizational change without individual change first. We are the ones we've been waiting for. It's not somebody else. There's no magic bullet that's going to appear. There's no genie. It's us. If we want better government, if we want better business, if we want to live in a better world, we have to evolve. We have to take back our power by not giving it away.
Phil, I'm curious from your perspective, when you're teaching a class and you're meeting with executives, you were telling me the other day, just recently in Texas, and had a meeting, and it went from 1 hour to 2 hours. What is the thing, if you may, that surprises people the most when you're talking to them about emotional, EQ?
The fact that it makes so much sense to them and they've never thought of it. They've never thought about it. They've been unconsciously incompetent. And as I'm going through and having these discussions, they're going, holy shit, that's right. That's why that happened. Yeah, okay. It's kind of like you're turning a light on for them. And once you turn that light on, you can't turn it out.
Okay. So I'm curious for you right now when it comes to your business and organization, how you're doing it, trying to make a difference. How are you measuring success?
Actions and results. The number of people that I'm able to impact and the number of people they're able to impact.
I'm just kind of curious, are you measuring that directly? So you're measuring it in terms of number of people who are coming to your courses and classes and things of that nature, and that indirect impact is always hard, to measure. Are you trying to do something like that to understand what that potentially could be?
I'm not sure I understand your question, but the results that people get by going through this program impact every aspect of their life. Revenue, career progression, family life. There's some YouTube videos that some of the executives that have gone through the program, short, 5 minute, 10-minute videos about their journey going through the MBL program, and that kind of, some feet you might be interested in watching. But it's phenomenal. It's incredible. It blows people away, and it's interesting. As they're going through this, they're going, "Holy shit, this stuff's amazing." And I say, "Yeah, I know. But can I ask you is there anything I could have said before you started down this path that could have prepared you for what you know now?" And they always say, "No. There's nothing you could have told me that could have prepared me for what I know now." And see, that's the difference between knowing something experientially versus knowing something intellectually. If what you know intellectually isn't reflected in your behavior, you don't really know it. You just think you do. So the development of leadership and emotional intelligence is an experiential process that always requires an initial leap of faith, because you can only connect the dots in hindsight, looking backwards.
Phil, I'm curious for you. Since it's all very correlated to who we are as people, I'm curious from your own perspective, what habits do you personally do on a consistent basis to make sure that you're performing your best?
All of them. Well, okay. So what does my day look like? For the last 15 or 20 years, I go to bed at 8 o'clock at night. I get up at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. I go for a walk, exercise, drink coffee, listen to podcasts, and start having conversations with people all over the world like this one. And I love it. There's nothing I would rather do with my life than what I'm doing now. And I just turned 70 years old. Do you want me to take this to a whole other level?
Give it a shot.
All right. We're not living life. We are life. Living for a brief period in time in a physical form, and the whole purpose of our human existence is to take the challenges we face and how we face them to raise our level of consciousness. Do you know that every single cell in your body is vibrating at exactly the same frequency? And that frequency is who you are. And when our bodies eventually wear out, our energy that's giving our bodies life, is who we are, simply leaves our body, and the body quickly disintegrates. Do you also know that over 99% of all DNA in everybody is identical? Male, female, doesn't matter. And that at every 7 years, every single cell, we've got over 100 trillion vibrating cells in our body. And in every 7 years, every single cell in our body dies and is replaced at least once, depending on the organ, several times. So there isn't a single brain cell, bone, muscle, heart, nothing that was there 7 years ago. How can we continue to exist if there isn't a single cell in our body that was there 7 years ago? And the answer is, we're not our bodies. We're the energy that gives our bodies life. So the whole purpose of our human existence, and where the energy physics comes into all of this, the whole purpose of our human existence is to take our challenges and how we face them, either with our walls up or our walls down, to increase our level of consciousness. And in doing that, we increase the collective consciousness. Most people don't do that. We spend over $4 trillion a year globally trying to be unconscious through drugs, alcohol, video games, all sorts of stuff. This helps us to become more conscious. So the less conscious we are, the more susceptible we are to giving away our energy with our ego-based fears. The more conscious we are, the less likely that's going to happen. But we spend over $4 trillion a year trying to shut that voice off in the back of our heads, and it causes us to become less conscious. We have about 50 to 80,000 thoughts a day. We have this thing going on in us 24/7, that thing going on in the back of our head, you're not good enough or whatever, that keeps us trapped in our comfort zones.
Phil, that was no small statement you just made there, and I appreciate you sharing that. So let me ask you one of my favorite questions I like to ask all our guests is, so now how do you measure success in your personal life?
Loving relationships. as opposed to fear-based relationships.
That's a great answer. It's interesting when one of the reasons I love to ask this question is people, depending on where they are in their life, answer it so differently. How they measure success in their personal life, and that I've heard a few times, not many times. What you said, is love or the number of wonderful relationships they have in their life, right? Of connectedness, and I think it's a great answer that you had there.
Let me give you another piece of information. Money has no value. Money was created as a placeholder for authentic service. Imagine that you and I were neighbors and we lived in the country, and you grew potatoes and I made pianos. Before the advent of money or shiny beads, if I wanted some of your potatoes, I had to try and convince you to take one of my pianos. And if you didn't want a piano, I was going to starve to death. So that wasn't working out too well. So as a society, we came up with this intermediary step called money as a way of moving wealth around. So maybe you didn't want one of my pianos, but Susie down the road did, and she gave me some shiny beads, and I came back and gave those shiny beads to you, and voila, an economy was born. But the point is that if we're focusing on money or revenue generation, we're focusing on the wrong thing. Money should never be the focus. It's the result of providing authentic service. And the best way to provide authentic service is through the development of your emotional intelligence. It literally enables you to outcare your competition.
Another fantastic answer there, Phil. First, we haven't talked about your own course a whole lot. No, we talked about your course some. What are some of the literature that you've created, and then why don't you tell us first of some of the books that you've helped initiate and authored?
Well, I've written 9 books. I've published over 5,000 articles. I've been on over 400 podcasts. I have a little newsletter I publish every day on LinkedIn. What do you want to know? I wouldn't recommend any of them, by the way. I do that for me.
Yeah, no, I do encourage you to go out, folks, and listen and connect with Phil and what he's doing. But before we get to that, because I want to go there in just a moment, what is a book that you have read that's inspired you that you want to share with others? I'm sorry, so for those who can't see, I could say out loud that book.
Oh, sorry, it's Eckhart Tolle's A New Earth. I love Eckhart Tolle. Please watch anything he does. Read. What he talks about in his books is what the NBL, the Master Business Leadership Program, develops. But he's 74 years old now, going on 75. He is amazing.
And for those who aren't familiar with Eckhart, Tolle is spelled Tolle. For those of you who are not familiar with that. But yeah, thank you. That's a wonderful book recommendation there. Now, Phil, how can people connect? Where are specifically the locations where best to find you?
I'm only on, the only social media I'm on is LinkedIn. I'm not on Facebook. I'm not on Twitter. I'm not on anything else. So I can send you, if somebody wants to chat with me, I'll send you a link to my Zoom calendar, and I'd be happy to continue the conversation.
Perfect. Yeah, please do. We'll make sure we include your Zoom calendar link in our podcast notes, and so people can connect and have a conversation with Phil. I know, as I have been with the conversations I've had with Phil, you will be energized and blown away all at the same time of some of the insights that he'll provide you, and once again, how, most importantly, once again, how can we make a difference for others? Phil, I want to thank you so much for being a guest on the Measure Success podcast today.
Thanks, Carl. I really appreciate the work you're doing, and it's an honor to be on your show.
And to everyone else who's listening, I hope it's just for me, it's a real treat to talk with incredibly intelligent and for people who are really trying to solve real significant world issues here, and what he has done with his courses and his writings to help us see what impact that's happening currently in the world and how there is a way to help overcome that. And I think it's wonderful that you're trying to teach and help us. As you said in the very beginning, this isn't about just growing and being better more. This is important for the existence of who we are as people and human beings. So once again, Phil, thank you. I encourage you once again to rate this show, go out and do that. That's how we continue to get great guests like Phil. And finally, as we always like to say, wishing you the very best at measuring your success Have a great day.
Thanks for listening to the Measure Success podcast. We'll see you again next time to learn from the best. Remember to subscribe now to get future episodes.